Sir Kannan Gopalakrishnan. He was working as a senior architect at Engineering Design Research Centre, L&T Construction, India's largest construction company. He's also worked on projects ranging from institutional buildings to international airports, apartment complexes to aircraft hangars. He's also attended 3 international conferences and 2 national conferences, and has also presented technical papers at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi, and the MSRIT, Bangalore. He's also won the national championship at Archaman at the India's largest architecture quiz. Sir Kannan Gopalakrishnan currently runs a design firm, Habitat Design Studio, and he is also a visiting faculty at the renowned architecture schools in Tamil Nadu.
Welcome back to UGC lecture series. This is AR 6502 History of Architecture and Culture 5. We are almost at the end of Unit 2, reviewing industrialization. In lecture number 18, we are going to look at the works and life of Frank Lloyd Wright, and if you remember the previous episode, we saw the works of Charles Rennie Mackintosh, Glasgow School, Vienna, secessionist architects such as Will Hoffman and Albrecht. Frank Lloyd Wright, an American architect, interior designer, writer and an educator. In his life, he has designed more than 1,000 structures, out of which more than 532 of them have been completed. Frank Lloyd Wright believed in designing structures that were in harmony with nature, humanity and environment, a philosophy which he so rightly called organic architecture. All his philosophy was exemplified in the best manner with this one project called Falling Water, which he designed in 1935. For that and all the other projects that he has done, he has been called the best all-time work of American architecture, Falling Water. Frank Lloyd Wright was the leader of the Prairie School of Movement, and he had this concept of Usonian homes, his unique vision for urban planning in the US. He has worked on a variety of projects such as offices, churches, schools, skyscrapers, hotels, museums. He also designed many interior elements of his buildings such as furniture, stained glass, the grills and everything. In his life, he wrote close to 20 books, many articles, and he was a popular lecturer in the United States and Europe. Let's take a look at some of his buildings. The first building that we are going to look at is a windmill. It's called the Romeo and Juliet windmill. A Romeo and Juliet windmill is a wooden tower. It's the oldest existing example of Frank Lloyd Wright architecture in Wisconsin. He designed this in 1886 simply to carry water to the hillside school and also to withstand some of the area's greatest storms. Critics said that this building would not stand for more than 10 years, but even today the building is standing. It stood for more than 100 years. When finally renovations had to be taken place in the building stood for more than 100 years. When they said building won't even stand for 10 years. It's called Romeo and Juliet windmill because if you look at the cross section, because this is an octagon which is mated to a diamond. This is the cross section that gives the building its strength. So this is why this building is called the Romeo and the Juliet building. The next famous example that we are going to look at is the Walter Gale house. It was designed in a geometric Queen Anne style of architecture, and this is an example which demonstrates the architect's inclination towards informal planning. Despite the several evident Queen Anne element of architecture, the Gale house has some geometric purity which makes this building very unconventional of Queen Anne architecture. This represented the starting point of the architect's move towards to free himself from the clutches of historic designs. Queen Anne style historic design, Wright's architecture was somewhere here, and this building represents somewhere in the middle, which he was planning to depart from historic architecture towards modernism. The building is somewhere here. The next famous example that we are going to look at here is Frank Lloyd Wright's own house and studio in Oak Park, Illinois. This building is a microcosm of the prolific designer, and it is an example that architecture is ever evolving in its aesthetic. Make a note of the horizontality in his architecture. His stress for the horizontal line is very evident in the architecture. In an age where people were going vertical, Wright was going horizontal. His house was one of the expression of his early formative years of architecture. This house represents a series of additions, and it also expresses the changes in philosophy which he underwent as an architect during the 20 years which he lived there. Between 1889 to 1909, he lived in his house, and whatever philosophical changes that he underwent, the building also underwent the same changes. This building was nowhere like not like any of his later priory style buildings. This building was very, very different. The front door of the home is in the traditional place, unlike all the other priory style homes where it is not so easy to find the approach to the house itself. The nice wraparound front porch sits beneath the house's massive triangular gable. This is the wraparound front porch, the massive gable over here. This is a private outdoor space which the Wright family often gather in the space to discuss private things. Once you enter the house, there is a main staircase that spills into the entryway. The living room itself beckons you to your left. Take a look at the living room and the dining room of the Wrights. The living room is actually the only room in the house that remains as it was in the original design, original 1889 house, and it also provides seating with storage underneath. So this bay window creates a space for people to sit, lets light inside, and also has space to store things inside. This is the living room that we saw with the two bay windows on either sides. The entrance itself leads to a steps. Immediately it automatically moved towards the left, towards the living room and towards the study. And if you had gone straight, you would have seen the dining room with the kitchen scullery spaces over here. He integrated his house and office in the same building. This is the main studio entry, the reception, office, drafting areas and library over here. If you go on to the top of the building, second floor, this is how it looks on the second floor. All the bedrooms on the top floor, it has roofs and decks, a playroom. In the middle of the large arc ceiling is an equally massive skylight that looks like this, with 4 intricately cut grill panels that screen the harsh midday sun. It gives you light, at the same time it gives you a character that filters through these grills. What Wright did in his house was he tried to experiment with a lot of new design ideas and decoration ideas, and eventually what he did was he tried to invent a lot of new design elements which he would in his later years try to develop into a style of his own. So the integration of the studio and the house was a radical departure from the rest of the home's shingle style interior. The interior of the house, the studio itself, was completely different from what is the interior of the house. So even though it's the same building, what Wright did here was he did not unify the elements of all the rooms. He clearly had a distinction. Okay, this is office and this is house. I'm going to differentiate it. This is going to be, my house is going to be in shingle style exterior. My office is going to be something different. He used this building as a testing ground for a lot of the motifs that he tried. Some of the motifs are, you can see in the picture itself. Tried a lot of motifs. He would, in the future, he would develop all these motifs into a style of his own, but this was his testing ground. Next, we are going to look at another important project of Frank Lloyd Wright, which is called the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum in New York. He designed a variety of plans for this building because he wanted to get this thing really correct. So what he did was he created a lot of plans, where one of the plans, scheme C, had a hexagonal shape and hexagonal level floors for all the galleries, while all the other schemes that he designed had a circular scheme and used a continuous ramp around the building. So, this is continuous ramp around the building. A circular ramp is something which is common for all the other schemes that he designed for this building, which eventually was selected. The initial concept was an inverted ziggurat. A ziggurat is like a pyramid, a pyramid which stacks smaller unit on top of the bigger unit. But here the whole concept is inverted down. The smaller unit is at the bottom, and the top unit is actually bigger than the bottom unit. So, an inverted ziggurat was the original concept which Wright had in mind, and the building looks like this. Wright did something very special in this museum layout, because conventionally museums were being designed in a way which Wright did not want to continue on the same way. So, what Wright did was, he thought that the visitors should be led through a series of completely interconnected rooms, and what he did was, he thought that he will take all the visitors from a lift to the topmost floor, and from the topmost floor he will connect all the galleries via one continuous ramp. So, when the visitors are coming down, when they are walking down the ramp, they can take a look at all these exhibits one by one when they are coming down. Walking down a ramp is very easy than going up. So, what he did was, he took them all up through the elevator, and then while coming down he came down through the ramp. All the visitors came through the ramp. This is how the interiors of the building looks like. The continuous ramps. So, the ramp starts over here, and then it is a continuous spiral to the bottom of the building. This way he had two advantages. One advantage is, the people are not getting tired. They clearly know what is going to happen to them. They know that, okay, I am going to be taken to the top floor via an elevator, I am going to walk down a ramp which is not a big deal, I can walk down. So, they are going to not be tired, and they will exactly know the way in which they need to go, just follow the ramp. So, you will get down to the end of the gallery. Number two is, what usually happens in a museum is, some exhibits you see them and you skip a variety of exhibition, because you skip an entire room. You can skip the entire section of the library or a museum by skipping a room. Here Wright did not allow anybody to skip any rooms. So, they have to continuously come through the ramp. So, which means that every part of the museum is actually seen by all people. So, that was another great advantage. The open rotunda afforded views to the viewers. This is the open rotunda. So, it gave the viewers to have different views of the building. One can even look down, up from here, visually interact with the people on different levels. He ascribed symbolic meanings to different shapes. Wright says that all the geometric forms suggest certain human ideas, certain moods, certain sentiments. For example, according to him, a circle means infinity, triangle is structural unity, the spiral means organic process, square is integrity. Based on these forms, what he wanted to achieve, he chose the form. Geometric form gives sentiments. So, for Wright it was simple. This is the plan of the Solomon R. Guggenheim Museum. He still uses the Romeo and Juliet idea of one element fusing with another element. The basic Romeo and Juliet idea is the same, except that the octagon became a circle and the diamond became this shape. Here again he uses triangles, squares, circles and spirals. This is the section of the building where he has designed the different ramps which continuously goes down. The central rotunda, which is a clear courtyard, and all the exhibits that are placed on the sides. Now, let us take a look at another project which is probably the most important project that Wright has designed, and the most famous one. It's called the Falling Water. Kaufman Residence, or the Falling Water, is a house designed in 1935 in rural Pennsylvania, about 43 miles from Pittsburgh. This house, the speciality of the house was it's partially built over a waterfall. The final working drawings were released in 1936, and the work began immediately in the next month itself. This is how the building looks, built over the waterfall itself. Here you can see the remnants of the bridge. This is how the falling water looks in the winter. So there were a lot of fights, a lot of misunderstanding between the client and the architect. Apparently the Kaufmans, the clients, were uncomfortable with what they saw, because they thought Wright had very insufficient experience in reinforced concrete, and his daring cantilever design, which he has designed over here, you can see the daring cantilever part here. So he wanted all these cantilever designs to be reviewed by a firm of consulting engineers. He did that, but Falling Waters still stands for dynamism and integration with striking natural surroundings. It has been often described as architectural tour de force of Wright's organic philosophy. Again, look at the horizontality which Wright has designed. The horizontal members are made of reinforced concrete and the vertical members are made of stones that were got from the quarry nearby. Frank Lloyd Wright's passion for Japanese architecture was highly influenced, strongly reflected in the design of this building, particularly where the interpenetrating of exterior and interior spaces, a strong emphasis placed on harmony between man and nature. These are the points where he clearly got a Japanese influence in his building. This is the plan of the building, where this is the waterfall, this is the bridge, and this is how you enter the house. You cross the Bear Run, you enter the house, and this is the waterfall, the terrace which we saw here. Here there is a waterfall ravine, and upon this ravine is where the building sits. This is the section of the building, and this is why the Kaufmans got really scared. They thought that this part would fall off. Not only did Frank Lloyd Wright design the entire thing with so much grace and with a lot of ideas incorporating the nature inside the building, but he also made sure that God is in the detail, according to what Mies van der Rohe said. He even gives importance to little things. When there is a stone, there are two stone walls and there is a glass between those two walls, he did not give a metal frame to the glass, which will totally negate the whole idea of stonework that is not uninterrupted. So what he did was, he gave a little caulking, a recess on the stone itself, and he placed the glass inside the recess. The stone walls now appear totally uninterrupted by the glazing. So there is no metal frame which you see. Similarly, he designed a lot of such things in this particular project. That is why the Falling Waters is still being talked about. The next famous building that we are going to talk about today is the Johnson Bax building. This building is completely opposite to that of the Falling Waters. In Falling Waters, what the architect tried to do was totally integrate the nature inside the building. But in Johnson Bax building, he totally deliberately denies the building environment. It closes itself like a fortress, totally isolated from the environment. Wright creates his own idea of architecture inside the building, because he thought that the relationship of the building with environment was very unhealthy and hostile. So he encountered them with outright denial. The building does not have any windows. It has a long blind facade with impressive red brick wall, but no windows. This is how the building looks, if you are wondering how it looks. Wright always designed a horizontal amount, contrary to what was so fashionable at that particular point of time, tall buildings. For Wright, the horizontal line was horizon. For him, it was horizon. A line has to be associated with the ground, and the only direction that could make the building belong is towards the ground. The resort has a vertical tower, but this does not belong to the original draft, but was designed 10 years later by Wright himself. And even in the vertical tower, you could see the horizontal line above all else. This is the vertical tower, and even in that tower, you could sense the horizontality which you sense in the other places of this building. To get the break in between these two facades, here, what Wright did was, he created two separate structures. The facades and the gap would be covered by a cornice. The cornice was formed by a glass of Pyrex tubes, which is placed on racks. Thereby, what actually created was, he not only achieves natural light inside the building, but also gets rid of the sharp right angles that gets created in the building. See, here in this building, you don't have the sharp right angles. Here the building is a gentle curve, so he also gets rid of the right angle. It kind of creates a cornice which people have never seen before. People usually see cornices that are projected away from the building, but here there is nothing that was seen earlier. And again, with this building, a new architectural style was born. This gives us an idea of how far Wright can go to get the unique architecture for that particular building. These are the famous columns in which the entire building is standing, with lighting placed on top. The building is held by 60 columns of 6.5 meters in height. The base is only 22 centimeter thick, which is expanding to reach the whole roof, covering the whole surface. This 22 meter thick column spreads out to take the entire load of the roof itself, which means each pillar, each column should be able to support at least 6 tons of weight. So, if you look at the pillar, it is only 22 centimeter in diameter, and look at the load which the building has to carry, 6 tons per column. Due to the skepticism that was around, the building generated a lot of skepticism. So, the commission said, we are going to approve this building only if the column will be able to withstand twice the load which it should actually take. If the column should take 6 tons of load, I will allow the commission approve only when the column takes 12 tons of load. They even thought that Frank Lloyd Wright should make a real, not just a scale model, but a real replica in itself, and they wanted to load the column. What they actually did was, when they made the column and then when they started loading it, it did not just take 6 tons, it took the entire 12 tons. When they were about to close the experiment, Frank Lloyd Wright, who was already very angry about the whole skepticism, about whole not believing in his concept thing, what he did was, no, don't stop the experiment, keep loading the column until it breaks, he said. So, they kept on adding loads to the column until the column finally broke at 60 tons. Frank Lloyd Wright designed a column that was only 22 centimeter wide, which can take a load of 60 tons when it is actually supposed to take only about 6 tons. Such was the depth of knowledge which Frank Lloyd Wright had when he was designing a building. For him, building is not just a few lines and few mosaics and few colors. For him, building is an organic element, an organism in itself, which has life, which has blood running through it. And Frank Lloyd Wright has understood every single cell of it. That is why we call him the greatest architect of our time. With this, we come to an end of this lecture. We can take a look at what we understood from here. We understood the life and works of the greatest architect of all time, Frank Lloyd Wright. We understood the contribution of Frank Lloyd Wright towards organic architecture, Prairie style, and early modernism. We understood the various early works of Frank Lloyd Wright, such as the Falling Water, Johnson Wax Building, etc. With this, you should be able to answer the following questions, which are going to appear on your screen right now. Explain the architectural character of the Johnson Wax Building with respect to innovation in architecture. Explain the Falling Water with reference to the context of the site. Explain the Guggenheim Museum with respect to its symbolism. What did Frank Lloyd Wright do and learn in his own house and studio project? Explained with sketches. With this, we are coming to an end of the second unit, and I would love to meet you with more examples and more such information in the next few episodes as well. Until then, thank you.
Bye.